I never thought a family member could erase me from my own life. At 31, I had steady work, a decent apartment, and a name I was proud to sign at the bottom of paychecks and contracts. Then, overnight, that name became poison. My cousin stole it, piece by piece, loan by loan, card by card, until every account, every signature, every record said I was a liar, a thief, a man who couldn't pay his debts. The eviction notice on my door was the first death blow. The second was my employer pulling me aside and saying, "We can't have someone with this kind of record on payroll." The third was friends looking me in the eye, doubt heavy in their silence, believing I had brought it on myself. While I slept in the back seat of my car, clutching paperwork that proved nothing to anyone, he was living free under my name. But he didn't count on me digging. And when I dug, I didn't just find him, I built the trap that would end him. My name is Jordan Hale. I'm 31, male, and until last year I worked as an IT support technician at a mid-sized insurer called Rook & Banner, tucked in a brick building off Millstone Avenue. My job was the quiet kind of useful, resetting passwords, chasing down phantom printer errors, crawling under desks with a flashlight clenched in my teeth while someone apologized for the dust bunnies. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. I kept systems humming, tickets closed, people moving. My life felt like that, too, small repairs, steady routines, nothing a clean toolkit and a checklist couldn't handle. The first crack didn't look like much. A plain envelope arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday in late March, return address from a bank I'd never used. I opened it standing at my kitchen counter, the laminate still warm from a pot of coffee. Past due notice, it read in a font that pretended to be calm. Account ending in -$3,812, balance $1,947.13. Somewhere, I had enjoyed a promotional APR and then stopped paying. I laughed out loud, a short, dry sound, and set the letter aside with the grocery circulars. Wrong guy, I figured. Another Jordan Hale somewhere, or an algorithm that had misfired. 2 days later, another envelope. Different bank, same tone. Immediate attention required. Account ending in -$9,041, balance $612.40. I didn't laugh this time. I sat down, the chair legs squealing against tile, and read the line that said, opened on 12/14. I tried to remember what I'd been doing on December 14th. I checked my calendar app, patching a legacy claims server, lunch at my desk, a note to pick up a replacement charger for my phone. Nothing that involved applying for credit. I called the first bank. After 5 minutes of hold music and one-click snap transfer, a woman told me, patiently, that the application had my name, my social security number, and my current address. "So it's you," she said, like we'd solved a riddle together. I told her it wasn't. She suggested I file a fraud claim. I wrote down the case number on a sticky note and parked it on the edge of my monitor like a neon-colored shrug. At work, the ticket queue swelled and receded like a tide. Monitor flickering. VPN disconnecting every 10 minutes. Laptop smells like burnt plastic? My hands moved on autopilot, reimage, replace, reboot. At lunch, I Googled how to place a fraud alert and ended up on a form that asked me to upload scans of my driver's license and a utility bill to prove I was me. The irony didn't make me smile. In April, HR called me in. The office smelled like eucalyptus and toner. Ms. Lang, who had a way of clasping her hands like she was bracing for turbulence, gestured to a chair. "It's routine," she said, "annual background refresh, insurance compliance." She slid a printout across the desk. There were red marks I'd never seen before. Delinquent accounts. Civil summons, collections. Her voice softened. "Is there anything we should know?" I told her I was handling it. That there'd been a mistake. That my name had bled onto someone else's file, or, words failed, crowded by the unfamiliar shame of defending my own signature. She nodded and said, "Keep us updated," in a tone that meant we're watching. When I left, I noticed how the hallway carpet muffled my footsteps. It felt like the building wanted silence from me. I started pulling my credit reports at night, the apartment lit by the cold square of my monitor. Lines of accounts I'd never touched scrolled past. A store card for a chain I'd never shopped at. A payday loan I would sooner eat my shoes than apply for. The dates arranged themselves into a pattern: application, approval, purchase, silence, late fee, late fee, late fee. Each one had my name spelled correctly. Each one used addresses that were mine: old rentals, a dorm I'd lived in for 1 semester, and my current place above the laundromat on Pine Street. Whoever had done this knew me in ways strangers don't. I called my mother to hear a voice that wasn't a collector or a clerk. She asked if I was eating enough, if my car was still making that chirping sound in the mornings. I didn't tell her about the letters. I told myself I didn't want to worry her. The truth was uglier, saying it out loud would make it real. When the first collector called, he sounded like a bored actor between lines. "Mr. Hale, we can resolve this for a reduced balance if you pay today." He had my birth date. He had the last 4 digits that are supposed to be a gate, not a turnstile. I told him someone had stolen my identity. He sighed, like I'd said the weather was inconvenient. "Then you'll need to prove it." On a Saturday morning, I sat on the floor with a ring binder and began to build a life-sized bug report, tabs labeled by creditor, a log sheet with dates and call reference numbers, photocopies of my license, my lease, my W-2. I highlighted every line that didn't belong to me, then highlighted it again, as if pressure would turn fluorescent ink into proof. The binder grew heavier. My head felt full of static. I kept thinking about keys. There's a small ritual to leaving my apartment: keys from the hook, wallet from the bowl, phone from the charger with its frayed cord taped over. The ritual says the world outside will recognize me. Doors will open when I turn the right metal in the right slot. The letters said otherwise. They said doors were already opening for someone else, everywhere my name fit. Late one night, exhausted and wired, I scrolled to a line I'd missed: furniture financing, approved. Delivery address, Marigold Court, Unit 3B. I'd never lived there, but I knew the street. My cousin Ethan had crashed near Marigold a while back with a girl who worked late shifts at a diner. I closed the tab like it was hot. The thought arrived and sat down, the impolite guest who doesn't wait to be invited. I told myself it could be coincidence. The city isn't small. Names repeat. Patterns lie. When sleep came, it was the heavy kind that doesn't rest you. I dreamed of signatures. My hand moved across paper in slow motion, over and over, while a second hand, familiar and wrong, signed on top of mine in a loop that swallowed the lines. In the morning, I found the past due notices on the table where I'd left them, real again, and the coffee tasted like metal. By the end of April, I had a fraud alert on my reports, a stack of case numbers, and the quiet sense that my tools weren't made for this job. I could map a network and trace a packet loss through 6 hops of bad routing, but I didn't know how to prove I was me to people who only knew me as a balance due. Still, I did what I've always done when systems break: I documented. I followed the logs. I prepared to escalate. I didn't know it yet, but the escalation was already underway. It had my name on it. And it was coming for everything that name touched. The trouble with lies is that they never arrive as monsters. They come as paper cuts, thin, stinging, easy to dismiss until you look down and realize you're bleeding from everywhere. By May, my mailbox was bleeding. It wasn't just the credit cards anymore. A letter from Brookhaven Utilities arrived, thanking me for opening a new account. Another came from a payday lender, congratulating me on my approved loan. Then came a notice from a medical collections agency about a bill from a clinic I had never visited. Each envelope bore my name in crisp black print, as if daring me to argue with it. I started a ritual: unlock the mailbox, sift through the envelopes with my thumb, brace myself for another cut. The smell of ink and paper made my stomach tighten. I hated paper now. Paper was betrayal. At work, things shifted. I noticed conversations halting when I walked into the break room. A teammate whispered, "Background check," under his breath. HR hadn't said anything new, but word travels in offices faster than email. I was suddenly the guy with the cloud over his head. Then came the knock. Not the kind that asks permission, but the kind that tells you the decision's already been made. It was 2:13 a.m. when I heard it, sharp raps that rattled the frame of my door. I stumbled up, heart hammering. Outside, a man in a cheap suit held out a thick envelope. His breath fogged in the night air. "Jordan Hale?" he asked, though he already knew. I nodded. He handed me the packet. "You've been served." The summons said I was being sued over an unpaid loan, principal $5,000, interest and penalties swelling the number to nearly $8,000. My name appeared 3 times on the first page, each instance as sharp and undeniable as my reflection in a mirror. At the bottom was a signature, supposedly mine, curling awkwardly across the line. But it wasn't my handwriting. It was a clumsy imitation, one I recognized in my gut even before my brain supplied the memory. Ethan. His E's had always sagged like broken bridges. I set the packet on the counter, the smell of fresh toner ink still clinging to it. My hands shook. The clock read 2:19 a.m., but I knew I wouldn't sleep. The next morning, I pulled all 3 of my credit reports again, highlighting lines that didn't belong to me. 30 pages in, I hit something I couldn't dismiss: a furniture financing plan under my name, with delivery to Marigold Court, Unit 3B. That address lit me up like a live wire. I knew it. Not mine, but familiar. Ethan had stayed there with a girlfriend a few years back, crashing on her couch between jobs. That was when the paper cuts became something worse. They weren't random wounds anymore. They had a pattern, a direction, a hand behind them. I called my mother again, my voice tight, and asked casually if she'd spoken to Ethan lately. "Oh, he's around," she said. "Working odd jobs, I think. He mentioned moving into a place over on Marigold." "Why?" I told her nothing. Hung up. Sat in silence while the refrigerator hummed like a threat. Collectors called daily now. I stopped answering unknown numbers, but they left voicemails anyway. "Mr. Hale, your balance is overdue. Mr. Hale, failure to respond may result in legal action." Each recording piled on like stones in my pockets. I started avoiding people. Friends invited me out, but I made excuses. What would I say if they asked how things were going? That my cousin was wearing my life like a disguise while I bled out in the shadows? No. Better to be alone than to see doubt in their eyes. And yet, even as the red flags multiplied, I still wanted to believe there was another explanation. Maybe Ethan wasn't behind all of it. Maybe I was paranoid, connecting dots that weren't meant to be connected. But the signatures, the addresses, the timing, they were too precise. Too personal. By the end of May, my binder was thick, its spine straining with documents. Each page was a wound, each tab a scar. And beneath all the paperwork, one truth pulsed steady as a heartbeat: someone I had trusted all my life was dismantling me, one cut at a time. By June, the paper cuts had become a hemorrhage. Credit cards, loans, collections, it was all a drumbeat in the background of my life. But the eviction notice was different. It wasn't paper this time. It was final. It arrived on a humid Thursday evening, taped to the cracked pane of my apartment door in screaming red block letters: "Notice to vacate, 10 days." The ink bled slightly where the summer air had dampened the page. My name was printed neatly at the top, as if the universe wanted to remind me who exactly had failed. I stood there in the hallway, the faint smell of someone's cooking drifting through the vents, and read it 3 times before my brain accepted what my eyes already knew. I wasn't losing an account this time. I was losing the ground under my feet. I stormed down to the leasing office with a folder of receipts. Rent payments made through the online portal, confirmations with dates, bank statements showing the money withdrawn. The manager, a heavy-set man with tired eyes, barely looked up from his monitor. "Mr. Hale, the payments bounced back." I slapped the receipts on his desk. "No, they didn't. Look, this is every month, on time." He sighed, tapping a key on his keyboard. "On my end, they show reversed. You'll need to take it up with your bank." "My bank?" I almost laughed. My bank account had been drained weeks ago by fraudulent charges. I was living on cash advances from a prepaid card, scraping by one gas station withdrawal at a time. "This isn't my doing," I said. My voice cracked, thin and desperate. The manager gave me that look I'd started to hate, half suspicion, half pity. "Mr. Hale, I don't make the rules. Legally, you're in arrears. 10 days. I'm sorry." Sorry. That word had lost all meaning. Back upstairs, I started packing. The scrape of cardboard against hardwood echoed like a funeral march. Each item I touched seemed to mock me: my framed certifications from work, books with my name in the flyleaf, even the hand-me-down couch Ethan and I had hauled up those stairs when I first moved in. I boxed it all, each piece a reminder that names don't protect you when someone else is using yours like a weapon. Friends offered sympathy in the form of half-hearted solutions. "Crash here for a couple nights. You can keep a few boxes in my garage." But sympathy is a resource that dries up fast, and I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me. They thought I was reckless, careless, the kind of guy who ignored bills until they caught up. Identity theft was a story people nodded at but didn't really grasp. So I lied to them instead. Told them I was downsizing, figuring things out. It was easier than watching doubt flicker across their faces. On the 10th day, I loaded what I could into my Chevy. The back seat sagged under the weight of boxes. My clothes went into trash bags. The rest, furniture, dishes, the cheap desk I'd worked from during late-night remote sessions, stayed behind, condemned to strangers. That night, I parked under a flickering streetlight outside an abandoned strip mall and curled into the back seat. The upholstery smelled faintly of oil and fast food, and the air was thick with the sour tang of my own sweat. The eviction notice sat folded in my pocket like a scar. I told myself it was temporary. A few weeks, maybe. I'd sort out the fraud, clear my name, get back on track. But deep down, I felt the truth pressing in. I wasn't just broke. I wasn't just in debt. I was being erased. And someone else, someone I loved once like a brother, was living my life in my place. Cars aren't meant for living. They're machines built for movement, not shelter. But when the eviction notice pushed me out of my apartment, my Chevy became the only roof I had left. The first night was the worst. I parked in the back corner of an abandoned strip mall lot, beneath a streetlight that flickered on and off like it was debating whether to keep watch. I curled across the back seat, knees jammed against the door, the seatbelt buckle digging into my side no matter how I twisted. The air was heavy, sour with the smells of oil, fast food wrappers, and sweat. I'd never noticed how the car trapped every scent until I had no choice but to breathe them in. Sleep came in fragments. I woke to every sound, the hum of distant traffic, the rattle of a shopping cart someone was pushing across the lot, the bark of a stray dog echoing in the empty air. Each time my eyes snapped open, my pulse surged like I'd been caught in some crime I hadn't committed. By morning, my body felt like I'd been folded wrong and left out in the sun. I wiped condensation off the inside of the windshield with the sleeve of my hoodie and told myself this was temporary. Just a week or two. Just until I figured things out. But weeks don't stay weeks when your name is poisoned. The routines of survival settled in fast. Food came from gas stations, sandwiches sealed in plastic, dollar menu burgers eaten in the driver's seat with the engine off to save fuel. Showers came from public restrooms and the occasional sneaky entry into the gym where my canceled membership still fooled the scanner. My duffel bag held everything I owned that mattered, 2 changes of clothes, the binder of evidence I kept building against the fraud, and a few family photos I couldn't leave behind. The hardest part wasn't the hunger or the cramped sleep. It was the way the world looked at me now. Neighbors I'd known for years crossed the street instead of saying hello. Former coworkers avoided eye contact in the grocery store. The whispers had spread, Jordan messed up. Jordan didn't pay his bills. Jordan lost everything. They didn't believe me when I said it wasn't my fault. And maybe that was the cruelest part, identity theft doesn't just steal your money. It steals the benefit of the doubt. Even my closest friends pulled back. At first, they offered sympathy, a couch for a night, a little cash to get back on my feet. But sympathy has an expiration date. By the 3rd week, their texts slowed. By the 4th, they stopped entirely. I was radioactive. A cautionary tale. At night, alone in the car, silence became its own torment. The kind of silence where every thought echoes twice as loud. I replayed every memory of Ethan, our childhood summers in the backyard, the times we swore we'd always have each other's backs, the nights we shared cheap beer and dreams about better futures. And then I thought about the bills, the fake signatures, the address on Marigold Court. The silence sharpened into something else, suspicion hardening into certainty. I didn't want to admit it yet, not even to myself. But the truth pressed closer every night I spent curled up in steel and silence. It wasn't strangers who had stolen my life. It was family. The first undeniable proof didn't come from an investigator or a lawyer. It came from a piece of mail. I'd managed to sweet-talk the clerk at my old apartment building into forwarding anything that still arrived for me. One evening, sitting in the driver's seat of the Chevy with the dome light flickering overhead, I tore open a thick white envelope. It was a utilities bill, gas, water, electric, opened in my name. But the service address wasn't Pine Street, where I'd lived. It was Marigold Court, Unit 3B. I knew that place. I'd been there once, years ago, when Ethan was dating a waitress named Carla. The walls had been thin, the carpet worn, the whole building smelled faintly of fried food from the diner across the street. Ethan had crashed there off and on, bragging about saving money while living off Carla's tips. My stomach sank as I held the bill. I hadn't been near Marigold in years. But the account was mine, at least, on paper. Someone had set up utilities using my social security number, my date of birth, my name. And I didn't need to guess who knew those details. The second piece of proof came a week later, when I pulled a new copy of my credit report at the public library. I sat hunched over the screen, the smell of old carpet and dust clinging to the air, while line after line of fraudulent accounts scrolled by. Then I saw it, an employer listed under my file that I had never worked for, Brookhaven Movers Incorporated. But Ethan had. Back in 2018, he'd landed a job there. He quit after 2 weeks, complaining the work was too heavy. I'd driven him to the interview, even loaned him a decent shirt. And now, years later, his short stint at that company was showing up on my file. I leaned back in the stiff library chair, the monitor glow harsh in the dim room. There was no denying it anymore. This wasn't random fraud. It wasn't a stranger in another state running numbers. It was Ethan. He wasn't just stealing my credit, he was wearing my life. The third piece of proof cut the deepest. One of the debts tied to my name was a payday loan. I walked into the office to dispute it, the lobby smelling of burnt coffee and desperation. The clerk, a woman with red nails tapping against the desk, pulled my file. "Here's your application, Mr. Hale," she said, sliding it across the counter. My breath caught when I saw the signature. It wasn't mine. The handwriting sloped differently, the letters uneven. But it was familiar. Ethan's E's had always sagged, like tired bridges. I remembered watching him sign a birthday card years ago, the same lazy curl at the end of his name. My cousin hadn't even tried to disguise it. I left the office with the papers in my hand, my chest tight, my vision blurring. Outside, the air was heavy with exhaust and the stink of hot asphalt. I leaned against the Chevy, the loan paperwork trembling in my grip. It was him. My cousin. My family. The boy I'd grown up with, the one who used to swear we were brothers first, cousins second. He hadn't just dipped into my life, he'd stolen it wholesale. And while I slept in a car, rolling from lot to lot like a fugitive, Ethan was sitting under a roof I was paying for, living a life built out of my name. I folded the papers carefully, slid them into the binder, and zipped it shut. My evidence wasn't perfect yet, but the mask had slipped. And I knew exactly whose face was behind it. Confronting Ethan wasn't a decision I made lightly. For weeks, I carried the utilities bill, the payday loan paperwork, and the credit report like weights in my bag, the binder pressing against my ribs every time I shifted in the car. I told myself I should wait, gather more evidence, talk to a lawyer, but the anger built until it demanded release. I found him one evening outside the riverfront lounge, leaning against the hood of a car that wasn't his. He was dressed better than I'd ever seen him, new sneakers, a leather jacket that still carried the shine of store lights, and that smug grin he wore like armor. He looked healthy, rested, alive. Meanwhile, I was running on 4 hours of broken sleep, clothes that smelled faintly of car upholstery, and the sour aftertaste of gas station food. "Ethan," I called out. He turned, surprised, then smirked. "Jordan. Damn, man, you look rough." I ignored the jab and walked straight up to him, holding out the papers. "You've been using my name. Utilities, payday loans, credit cards. I have the proof. I know it's you." For a moment, his grin faltered. Just for a second. Then it was back, wider than before. He took a drag from his cigarette and blew the smoke to the side. "Proof? Come on, man. You're always so dramatic." I shoved the payday loan form in his face, finger tapping the signature. "That's your handwriting, Ethan. I know your E's. You didn't even try to hide it." He flicked ash onto the ground, unfazed. "So what if it looks like me? Could be anyone. You think a judge is gonna side with you? You, the guy living out of his car, the guy everyone says can't keep his finances straight? Or me?" He spread his arms, showing off the jacket, the shine of his watch. "Look at me, Jord. I'm doing fine." The words landed like a punch. He wasn't even ashamed. "You've destroyed my life," I said quietly, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and grief. "I lost my job. My apartment. Friends think I'm a screw-up. And you," I jabbed the binder toward him, "you're standing here laughing about it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "You always thought you were better than me. College, steady job, saving money like some old man. You never knew what it's like to hustle. I just took what was there. If you couldn't protect it, maybe you didn't deserve it." There it was, the confession, not in writing, but in his tone. And it was worse than I expected. Not just theft. Contempt. He enjoyed watching me sink. I clenched my fists, every muscle screaming to hit him. But I didn't. Violence wouldn't fix what he'd broken. It would only prove his point, that I was reckless, unhinged. Instead, I stepped back. "You've made a mistake, Ethan," I said, my voice steady now. "You think I'm weak because I took the fall quietly. But I'm not done. I will prove what you did. And when I do, you won't be standing under streetlights with that grin. You'll be sitting in a cell." His smirk twitched, but he covered it with another drag from his cigarette. "Good luck with that," he muttered. I turned and walked away, my hands trembling, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Behind me, I heard him laugh, a short, mocking sound that followed me all the way back to the car. That night, I couldn't sleep. His words looped in my head, poisonous and smug. But beneath the anger, a new feeling took root, resolve. He thought my silence was permanent. He thought he could twist the story, make me look like the failure, the liar. But I had the binder. I had the truth. And I was going to use it. I stopped thinking of myself as a victim and started acting like a sysadmin with a breached network. When something gets inside your perimeter, you don't throw your hands up and hope. You isolate, log, and trace. Step 1 was containment. I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus, then added an extended fraud alert that forced any creditor to call a number I controlled before approving new lines. The clerk on one of the calls asked for a callback PIN. I wrote it on the inside cover of my binder, then copied it again into a hardbound lab notebook I'd bought from an office supply store, sewn spine, numbered pages. I signed the inside front cover and dated it. Chain of custody starts with small, boring rituals. Step 2 was to create an official record of the breach. I walked into the Brookhaven Police Department on a Monday at 8:07 a.m., the lobby still smelling like disinfectant and wet boots. I filed an identity theft report with Officer Linners, who typed with the calm of someone who has seen every kind of mess. I listed each fraudulent account, the addresses that weren't mine, the summons from the payday loan. She gave me a case number, BPDIT 24-1183, and a stapled copy stamped with the city seal. I slid it into a transparent sleeve, wrote the time I received it, 8:43, and photographed it on the clerk's counter with my phone. Metadata matters when the other side calls you a liar. Next came the creditors. Under the Fair Credit Reporting laws, even the fictional ones our town pretends to follow, a victim can demand the records behind fraudulent transactions. I drafted 609E style letters in the library, the cursor winking at me like a dare. Provide copies of applications, IP logs, delivery addresses, call recordings, and any identification used, I wrote, attaching the police report and an identity theft affidavit I'd filled out until my wrist cramped. I mailed each letter certified, return receipt requested. The green cards came back days later with signatures in bold cursive. I taped them into the notebook and logged the postmarks. Utilities were trickier. Brookhaven Water and Light is municipally run, which meant their records were public if you asked the right way. I filed a records request under the state's Public Access Act asking for the application for service at Marigold Court, Unit 3B, opened in my name. A week later, I stood at a plexiglass window while a clerk handed me a photocopy packet still warm from the machine. On page 2, a timestamp, 9:41, 12/16. On page 3, a blurry scan of a driver's license that wasn't mine, my name, Ethan's face. The photo was washed out, but I knew that jawline, the faint scar under his left eye from when we were 12 and he caught a fence nail. Someone had layered my identity over his features and the system had knotted it through. The packet also listed verifier, clerk 417. I found her at a standing desk near the back, a woman with gray hair braided into a crown. "Do you remember this?" I asked, showing her the page. She studied it, then shrugged. "Holiday week. People in and out." He said his wallet was stolen, had the number memorized. She paused. He was nervous. Kept looking over his shoulder. I wrote her name, time, and exact quote into my notebook. Direct quotes, bracketed, dated. No embellishments. I went hunting for postal records next. If Ethan had rerouted my mail, there'd be a change of address trail. The postal inspector's office shares a hallway with a DMV branch that smells like stale coffee and impatience. A young agent with neat handwriting explained I could submit a COA verification request for suspected fraud. 2 weeks later, I received a printed form. An online change of address had been initiated from my Pine Street apartment to a P.O. box on the south side, then canceled the same day. The request listed a Gmail address I didn't recognize and an originating IP block assigned to Riverfront Wi-Fi, public internet provided along the bar strip where Ethan liked to smoke and brag. I took a photo of the header, then ran the IP through an open tool. Riverfront CityNet Pool 04. I wrote it down anyway. Good cases are built out of small stones. I visited the courthouse to copy the complaint from the payday lender that had served me at 2:13 a.m. The clerk slid the file across the counter and I paid 80 cents a page, my last quarters clinking into the tray. In the exhibits, I found another signature, Ethan's sagging E, attached to a driver's license number that was mine. The notary stamp was smeared, the commission number barely legible. I jotted it down and, later that night in the car, cross-checked it against the Secretary of State's database on my phone. The commission belonged to a temp at a shipping store near Marigold. I went there the next day and bought a padded envelope I didn't need just to see the counter and the little brass notary plaque. The clerk looked up, bored. "Can I help you?" I noted his name tag and the smell of packing tape and copier ozone and left. Back in the Chevy, I spread the pages across the back seat like a crime scene and drew a timeline. 12/14, first card application. 12/16, 9/41, Utilities opened at Marigold in my name with Ethan's face. 0103, furniture delivery scheduled to 3B. 0211, payday loan contract notarized at the shipping store. 0329, online COA attempted and cancelled. I added places: Riverfront Bar Strip, Municipal Utility Office, Shipping Store, Marigold Court. I drew lines like cables between network nodes. The picture that emerged wasn't complicated. It was simply brazen. I started hardening my evidence. Every PDF I downloaded, I hashed with an MD5 and wrote the checksum in the notebook beside the file name, then copied the file to 2 encrypted drives, one in my glove box, one taped under the spare tire hatch. I photographed each paper on a contrasting background and saved the images with ISO-style timestamps, 2024-0618T213712Z. JPG. I wasn't going to hand anyone a pile of he said and maybe. If I ever put this in front of a DA, I wanted my binder to feel like a machine that could run on its own. I also filed an internal request at Rook and Banner to print the log of my building access card for December through February. It was a long shot, but if anyone later claimed I'd been with Ethan at an application, I wanted to show where I'd actually been. The system admin in security, a guy named Phelps who liked to talk shop, quietly slid me a CSV, entries and exits with timestamps down to the second. 12/16/938, card read at the server room. 9:41, utilities signed across town. 2 Jordans in one city at the same moment, and only one of us had a badge that pinged a door. At night, I lay in the back seat, the binder under my jacket, and listened to the tick of cooling engines in the lot. The fear that had knotted my chest for months loosened slightly, replaced by a colder sensation: focus. Ethan had thought identity was just a set of numbers and a signature. He didn't understand how loud the trail of a lie is when you know where to place your ear. I still didn't have his voice on tape. I didn't yet have the clean, cinematic moment where a man damns himself out loud. But I had enough to build the stage and aim the lights. The next move would require bait, patience, and a lens that didn't blink. I'd gather the documents, the logs, the notarized lies. My binder was thick with proof that Ethan had been living under my name, but paper doesn't speak loud enough to silence a liar. Ethan was slippery, he'd deny, twist, smirk his way out of any accusation. What I needed wasn't just records. I needed his voice. His face. Something that left no room for maybe. So I set a trap. It started with a charger. Not the kind you'd pick up at a convenience store, but a discreet camera disguised as a USB wall plug. I ordered 2 online and had them shipped to a locker downtown, avoiding my name and address entirely. When they arrived, I tested one in the Chevy, plugging it into the dash outlet. The footage was grainy, the audio tinny, but it was clear enough to see the pattern on my shirt and hear the crunch of fast food wrappers under my elbow. Good enough. Next, I rehearsed the script. Ethan loved to brag when he thought he was safe, especially if he could spin it as hustling. I'd feed him lines, let him think I was wavering, maybe ready to forgive, maybe even join in if the money was good. His arrogance would do the rest. I called him on a Thursday evening, my voice flat, careful not to let the anger leak through. "We need to talk," I said. "I can't keep taking all the hits while you're living it up. People are asking questions. If I go down, you go down too." There was a pause, then that familiar laugh. "Relax, Jord. You're too wound up. Come by tomorrow, I'll lay it out for you. You'll see it's not a big deal." Perfect. I spent the night in the Chevy, parked under the glow of a gas station light, fine-tuning the angle of the charger camera in my apartment. I still had the keys. Technically, the unit was mine until the eviction filing cleared the system, and I set up the device near the couch where Ethan always slouched. The lens pointed straight at the spot he favored, disguised among a tangle of cords. When Ethan arrived the next day, he carried himself like a man untouchable. New sneakers, another watch, a bag of takeout that filled the air with the smell of fried chicken. He sprawled on the couch, grease on his fingers, confidence dripping from every word. "You stress too much," he said between bites. The depot job was easy. Sprayed the cameras, loaded the truck, out in under an hour. Nobody saw a thing. And the best part? He smirked. "They had your name in the system, not mine. You were the firewall. They'll never get past it." I kept my face neutral, my voice low. "And the loans? The utilities?" He shrugged, licking salt off his thumb. "All in the game. You think I'm paying for lights and water when I can just sign your name? Come on, Jord, you know me better than that." Every word was being recorded. His face clear, his voice sharp, his arrogance unfiltered. I asked one last question, forcing it through clenched teeth. "And you don't feel guilty?" Not even a little? You left me homeless. He laughed, loud and careless. Guilty? You're still alive, aren't you? You'll bounce back. I just did what I had to. Don't act like you wouldn't, if you had the guts. That was it. The confession. The mask fully dropped. When he left, tossing the takeout bag into the hallway trash, I unplugged the charger camera with trembling hands. The memory card slid into my palm like the weight of justice itself. I locked the door behind me, sat in the dim glow of the Chevy, and watched the footage on my laptop. The picture wasn't perfect. The sound wavered when he leaned back. But it was enough. His face, his voice, his smirk, all admitting the crimes he thought he'd buried under my name. For the first time in months, the fear inside me shifted into something colder, sharper. I wasn't the hunted anymore. I was the one holding the trap. I didn't sleep the night I captured Ethan's confession. I stayed in the driver's seat with the laptop open, replaying the footage until my eyes stung. At 0:13 and 42 seconds he said, I sprayed the cameras and loaded the truck. At 0:18 and 3 seconds he said, utilities? Signed your name. Why would I pay my own? At 0:22 and 51 seconds he laughed, guilty? You'll bounce back. I wrote those timestamps in my lab notebook, underlined each, and drew a box around the word confession. Then I did what I'd trained myself to do on bad nights in the server room, I hardened the evidence. The camera wrote. MP4 files with embedded creation stamps. I copied the card to 2 encrypted drives in a cloud vault under a burner email. I generated hashes for each file, MD5, 9B1C, SHA256, 7F2D, and recorded them beside the file names. I exported a still frame at 0:17 and 59 seconds where the wall clock behind Ethan reads 6:32 p.m., visible over his shoulder. On the audio track, a TV down the hall carried the anchor's voice reading a date and a weather alert for a thunderstorm that had hit the south side that afternoon. Real-world anchors, synced and timestamped, stitched the clip to a day you could hold in your hand. Paper speaks quietly on its own, so I made it talk in chorus. I pulled my credit reports again and printed the pages showing the furniture purchase delivered to Marigold Court. The order number was there, a barcode of debt. I took it to the store on River Avenue and told the clerk I needed the signed delivery ticket for my records. She scanned the order and, without looking up, printed a carbon copy, delivery 0103, 3:14 p.m., recipient signature Jordan Hale. The loop of the J was mine, the rest was Ethan's loose chaos. I slid the copy into a sleeve, noted the clerk's name from her badge, and wrote the smell of the counter, cardboard dust and citrus cleaner, because details keep you honest. Back at the shipping store that housed the sloppy notary, I asked for a generic notarization, then declined at the last second after seeing the journal on the counter. Forgot my ID, I said, and left a preservation letter in an envelope addressed to the manager, referencing case BPDIT 24-1183, requesting they retain CCTV and the notary log for 0211 between 2 o'clock to 4 p.m. I emailed the same letter from the library to the store's public inbox and blind copied Officer Linners. 10 minutes later, she replied, received. Will request under your report. The word we put steel in my spine. Utilities answered my public records request with a second packet, application metadata, including the device type used for the online form, Android, Chrome 119, and the IP 192.0.2.41, which geolocated to Riverfront CityNet Pool 04. I printed the header and taped it beside the screenshot of Ethan on my couch describing how he opened service with your number memorized. On page 5, the clerk's internal notes said, applicant unable to produce physical ID, provided SSN, prior address on Pine, verified verbally. I bracketed prior address on Pine. That detail didn't live on social media. It lived in family. I called the payday lender and invoked the magic phrase the law gives you. Under 609E, I'm the victim of identity theft. Provide applications, call logs, and recordings. The supervisor pushed back until I read her my police report number and the statutory language again. 2 days later, a secure link landed in my burner inbox. I sat in the library, headphones on, and listened to a call recording. A man's voice answering knowledge-based questions that only Ethan and I knew. First grade teacher, Mrs. Baird, color of Dad's old truck, primer gray, street I lived on at 5, Holly. He got 2 wrong and laughed, then corrected himself. I recognized the laugh. I clipped the audio at 3:12 when he spelled my last name aloud, turned lazy on the Hale. I exported the clip and logged the hash. I needed one more piece with ink on it. The notary's journal wasn't mine to see, but the Secretary of State's office fields complaints. I filed one online, attached the smudged commission number, and described the mismatch between my identity and the face on the utility application. I wasn't sure it would move the needle now, but I wanted a timestamp trail headed somewhere official. If the dominoes started to fall later, the journal entry would be waiting. I met with Officer Linners again, binder on my lap, the room smelling like old carpet and coffee gone lukewarm. I laid out the timeline: 12/16 utilities, 0103 furniture, 0211 payday loan, 0329 change of address attempt, 06/ confession on video. She flipped through the sleeves and stopped at the still frame with the wall clock. You said this was recorded at your old unit? I nodded. You still have access? I nodded again. She tapped the page. We'll need a statement about how the device was placed and recovered. I had already written one, 2 pages, single-spaced, signed and dated, with the model of the camera, where it sat, and who had access to the room. She looked at me over the paper. You've done half my job. It still wasn't perfect. A defense attorney could call the confession bravado, could claim the signature was sloppy because I was stressed, could say the delivery ticket was forged by someone else. That's why I went for a second recording, one that sounded like instruction, not boasting. I picked a neutral place with cameras of its own, the cafe in the old train station where the ceiling fans whisper and the counter bell rings like a metronome. I told Ethan I wanted to square up, to understand the method in case anyone asked me questions. I can keep you out of it if I know what to say, I lied. He came hungry for an audience. I set my phone on the table like any customer would, screen dark, voice memo rolling. I asked how he'd pass the phone verifications. He explained the pattern: start the online application on public Wi-Fi, switch to a colon at the question about ID upload, claim the camera wouldn't work, offer memorized data instead. They're underpaid and in a hurry, he said at 0:06 and 31 seconds. You give them 3 right answers quick, they stop caring about the 4th. He listed the right answers. He named the clerk at Brookhaven Movers who still vouched sometimes. He leaned back, proud, as the bell at the counter rang twice. The cafe's wall clock read 4:18 p.m. On the TV above the pastry case, the local anchor teased a story about the high school's cancelled game. All those anchors again, stitching his voice to the day. When he left, I took 2 photos from my table: the clock, the TV, the numbered booth plaque. Then I stood outside and photographed the municipal camera bolted under the eave facing the door. I wrote an email to Linners in the parking lot: second recording captured. Location cameras likely. Requesting preservation. She replied with a thumbs up emoji and a case number addendum. Sometimes justice begins with paperwork, and sometimes it begins with a small yellow icon on a cop's screen. I went back to the Chevy and spread the evidence on the back seat: stills, receipts, hashes, logs, until it looked like the inside of a mind finally making sense. Then I built an index: Exhibit A through N, descriptions, sources, dates, hashes, and where the original lived. I added my access card CSV from work, 12/16 941 entry into the server room while I was allegedly opening utilities across town. 2 Jordans again. Only one was real. I closed the binder and felt the click of the rings as something like an answer. Ethan had signed my name and sealed contracts with it. He'd stolen time I'll never get back. But now I had his voice teaching the method, his face confessing the motive, his lazy E draped across paper he had no right to touch. Signed. Sealed. Stolen. And ready to be shown to someone whose job was to make sure thieves learn the meaning of consequence. The binder had become more than a collection of papers. It was a weapon, one I'd spent months sharpening, one that now hummed with an edge I could almost feel. Each sleeve held a piece of Ethan's arrogance, each tab a date he thought he'd buried. My Chevy had turned into an evidence locker on wheels, the smell of old upholstery mixing with printer ink and the faint tang of adhesive from too many envelopes. But evidence is useless if it dies in a binder. I needed a vector. The police report gave me standing, but I knew better than to trust the system alone. I'd already learned how bureaucracy grinds down victims until they're dust. If I handed everything over too soon, it risked disappearing into a case file where Ethan could twist it as bravado, coincidence, or worse, turn it back on me. No, this had to hit in a way he couldn't smirk away. I built redundancies first. The external drives I'd hidden under the spare tire hatch and inside a hollowed-out tech manual got new copies of the video and audio recordings. I generated fresh hashes, wrote them into the notebook, and logged the date of duplication, 08/12, 2107. Then I mailed 2 padded envelopes, one to a P.O. box I controlled, another to my friend Drew, the supply manager who'd tipped me off about the copper wire. Inside each was a flash drive labeled only case, Hail V. Hail. If anything happened to me or the binder, the story would still move. The second step was building a timeline clean enough for a stranger to follow in minutes. I spread the documents across the Chevy's back seat like I had before, then numbered them in sequence. 1. Utilities application, Ethan's face, my name. 2. Furniture delivery receipt, forged signature, Marigold Court. 3. Payday loan contract plus notary stamp, lazy e-signature. 4. Audio recording 1, Ethan explaining the spray the camera's depot job. 5. Audio recording 2, cafe confession, explaining the method. 6. Video recording, my old apartment, wall clock and thunderstorm alert anchoring the date. 7. Work access logs, proving I was in the server room at the same time I was opening utilities across town. Each was labeled, hashed, and indexed. I wanted anyone, even a skeptical reporter or DA, to flip the binder and feel it closing like a vice around Ethan's throat. But the real net wasn't just paper. It was exposure. I researched who in Brookhaven could actually make noise. The DA's office was clogged with low-level fraud cases. Most victims never saw restitution. But the Brookhaven ledger had teeth. Their investigative journalist, Karen Doyle, had taken down a city councilman the year before with nothing more than campaign receipts and late-night bar photos. She understood documents, timestamps, the choreography of lies. I drafted an email with the subject line, confession and proof of identity fraud, local case. I kept it simple, my name is Jordan Hale. My cousin stole my identity and left me homeless. I have audio, video, and documentary proof. If you're interested, I can meet and show you everything. I attached a still frame of Ethan mid-laugh, time-stamped, with the wall clock over his shoulder. Not the full file, just enough to bait interest. Before sending, I created a dead man switch. A scheduled email with the full cloud link set to go out in 72 hours if I didn't cancel it. Recipients, Doyle, Officer Linners, and Drew. If Ethan caught wind and tried to silence me, the evidence would outlive me. I clicked send. That night, parked under the sodium lamps of a half-empty grocery lot, I felt the first hint of something I hadn't in months, leverage. Ethan had thought my silence was permanent, that my desperation was bottomless. But now, I wasn't just clawing for survival, I was dragging him toward a cliff. The net was in place. The ropes were drawn tight. And all it would take was one pull to bring him down. Karen Doyle didn't waste time. She replied to my email within 2 hours, her words short and sharp, I'm interested. Bring everything. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Ledger office. The next morning, I walked into the newsroom with the binder under my arm. The place smelled of printer toner and burnt coffee, keyboards clattering like rain on a roof. Doyle was waiting at a corner desk, a pen tucked behind her ear, eyes that cut straight through small talk. Sit, she said. I laid the binder on the desk and flipped it open to Exhibit A. She skimmed the utilities packet, her fingers tracing the smudged copy of Ethan's driver's license. Then the delivery receipt, the payday loan form, the audio transcripts. Finally, I queued up the video on my laptop, Ethan on my couch, smirking, bragging about the depot job and signing my name to everything else. For 20 minutes, Doyle didn't speak. She just took notes in quick, slashing handwriting. When the video ended, she leaned back, exhaled, and said, Your cousin hung himself. And you brought the rope. The article hit 3 days later. Identity theft close to home, Brookhaven man's double life exposed by hidden camera confession. The front page carried stills of Ethan mid-brag, timestamp glowing in the corner. The piece was brutal, detailing how he'd stolen my identity, the fraud trail, the arrogance of his confessions. Doyle wove in my story too, the eviction, the nights in the car, the probation officer who saw me drowning. It wasn't pitying, it was surgical, laying bare how identity theft hollowed me out while Ethan thrived. The online version embedded the audio clip from the cafe where he explained his method. Readers could hear his voice, cocky and careless, spelling my last name wrong while explaining how to trick overworked clerks. Comments poured in, what a snake. Imagine doing that to family. Lock him up. Within hours, social media had the story trending. Ethan's face was everywhere, screenshots, memes, threads dissecting his arrogance. His phone must have exploded, because that night he stormed into the Chevy's lot, pounding on the window until my heart jumped into my throat. You set me up. He shouted, his face twisted, eyes wild. You think this makes you the hero? You think they'll forget you lied on applications too? I opened the door and stepped out, binder in hand. Difference is, Ethan, I documented everything. I owned what wasn't mine. You buried yourself. And now the whole city sees you for what you are. He shoved me, hard, but his hands trembled. You ruined me, he spat. No, I said, steady this time. You did that yourself. I just made sure the world heard it. 2 days later, police executed a warrant on Marigold Court, Unit 3B. They pulled copper spools, stolen tools, even unopened credit card statements addressed to me. Ethan was arrested on charges of identity theft, fraud, and larceny. His mugshot replaced his smirk in the papers. For the first time in nearly a year, my name wasn't the one dragged through the mud. It was his. Ethan's trial didn't drag. The evidence was too heavy, too precise. The jury saw the video, him slouched on my couch, laughing about spraying the cameras. They listened to the cafe recording where he bragged about tricking clerks. They saw the signatures, the utilities, the forged loan paperwork. My binder became the spine of the case, each exhibit stacking weight on his shoulders until he couldn't move. Guilty on all counts. When the judge read the verdict, Ethan didn't look at me. He stared forward, jaw clenched, the swagger drained from his face. 5 years in prison. Restitution. His name printed in headlines not as a hustler, but as a thief. Mom sat in the back row, crying quietly into a tissue. She never said a word to me, not that day, not since. Blood is complicated. For me, the aftermath was quieter. Probation lifted. My credit file began the slow crawl of repair. A sympathetic HR manager at a small IT firm took a chance on me after reading Doyle's article. I rented a modest one-bedroom on the edge of town, a place that smelled of fresh paint and possibility. I even bought a new binder, not for evidence this time, but for pay stubs, receipts, and a lease with my real name stamped clean across the top. Some nights, though, I still woke to the memory of those months in the Chevy, the way silence pressed in like a weight, the way my own name felt like a curse. Identity theft doesn't just steal money. It steals trust. In systems. In strangers. In family. One evening, I walked past Marigold Court. The blinds in Unit 3B were shut tight, the building sagging into itself. The street smelled faintly of fried food from the diner across the way. I stood there for a long moment, binder tucked under my arm, the summer air warm on my face. And I thought about everything Ethan had taken. My job. My home. My good name. But not my resolve. Not my proof. Not my voice. I turned away, the night settling calm around me. Because in the end, he carried nothing but ashes. And I carried my name. Final line, because in the end, he carried nothing but ashes, and I carried my name.